The afternoon my sister-in-law slapped me across the face in front of my daughters was the afternoon 18 years of restraint finally ran out. And I promise you, that restraint had cost a great deal more than she ever understood. Before we get to the slap, I need to back up, because if I start there, you will miss everything that made it matter. My name is Derek Callahan. I am 46 years old. I live in Brentwood, just south of Nashville, Tennessee. I run a cybersecurity consulting firm off Peabody Street downtown. We have 14 full-time employees, 2 anchor corporate contracts that took a decade to land, and a reputation I built out of nothing. And I do mean nothing. On Saturday mornings, I coach my youngest daughter's rec league soccer team. By any honest measure, my life is a good one, and at the center of it is Elena Callahan, 41, quick-witted, laughs with her whole chest, makes a skillet cornbread that has genuinely ended arguments. We've been married 18 years, and I mean married, not cohabiting, not tolerating each other out of habit. Actually, embarrassingly, still in love. The kind that makes our friends groan when we walk into a room holding hands like teenagers. Then there are my girls. Sophie is 11. Serious. Exact. Already correcting my grammar at the dinner table. Mia is 8. Pure chaos in braids. And the funniest human being I have ever met. Elena and I adopted both of them together, after 5 years of trying everything else first. Elena has a medical condition that made carrying a pregnancy impossible. We grieved that quietly. The two of us. And then we made a decision. We chose our daughters on purpose. Every single day since. I choose them on purpose. I need you to understand that before anything else in this story makes sense. Now, Renata Cross. Renata is Elena's older sister. 45. Lives out in Franklin with her husband Doug and their 3 sons. The 2 oldest, Preston and Chase, are through high school and mostly out of the house. Eli is the youngest at 12. Doug used to be the golden boy of the family commercial insurance brokerage. The kind of guy who leased a new truck every 2 years and corrected people at dinner parties about wine. About 4 years ago, Doug got tangled up in a licensing violation at his firm. Lost the job. And the industry quietly stopped returning his calls. Since then, he's been chasing freelance policy placements. And he's got that particular anxious hum of a man who peaked a while back and is working very hard to hide it. Renata has never liked me. Not from day one. When I met Elena, I was 29 and broke in the specific, humiliating way not homeless broke, but letting your girlfriend cover dinner broke. Building a business on a maxed card and pure stubbornness. Elena had a steady job, a decent condo, and a family that decided, before I ever opened my mouth, that I wasn't good enough for her. Renata led that committee. She never said it outright. People like Renata never do. It lived in the way she looked past me at family dinners. The way she'd talk to Elena like I wasn't in the room. The polite little questions that were actually knives. So, Derek, is the business still finding its feet? Delivered with a smile that made you feel like you should thank her for asking. I made a decision back then and held to it for 18 years. I would not fight Renata. I would not hand her the satisfaction of a scene. I loved Elena too much to make her choose between family peace and her husband's pride. So I stepped back, way back at gatherings. Pleasant. Present. Out of Renata's orbit. Letting Elena manage her own sister. It worked. Mostly. What Renata never knew. Because she'd already filed me under nobody, and never bothered to update the file. Was that the business eventually did very well. Better than well. While she was still treating me like a rescue project Elena had dragged home, I was signing contracts that would have made her blink twice. When Renata and Doug hit financial trouble a few years back, a mortgage shortfall, private school tuition for Eli spiraling. They went to Elena. Of course they did. And Elena came to me. Baby, I know it's a lot to ask. Just handle it. I told her to pull it from our joint account, and let's keep the peace. I know how that sounds. And I knew how it looked. Elena handed her sister money from an account Renata assumed was mostly Elena's. I let her keep believing that. It was easier than the conversation we'd otherwise have to have. So Renata kept believing her little sister was her financial lifeline, and kept believing that Elena's husband was some quiet guy who tagged along to holidays. That arrangement ran longer than I like to admit mortgage shortfalls. Tuition installments. The odd emergency Doug would call Elena about directly. Never me. Never Derek. In Renata's version of the world, I was furniture. Expensive furniture, as it turned out. But furniture all the same. The Saturday everything cracked open started like every other early June Saturday in Middle Tennessee, bright and already warm by 9. The cookout was at Elena and Renata's mother's place out past Franklin. A rambling ranch house with a covered back porch and a yard big enough to lose a football in. Extended family. Longtime neighbors. A smoker running since dawn. Someone had a portable speaker going. Kids everywhere. I was in a good mood. We'd closed a solid contract renewal that week. The girls had been sweet all morning. And Elena was wearing this deep plum sundress that made me feel 29 again. Minus the broke part. I had exactly zero reason to expect the day to go sideways. I'd loaded a plate with pulled pork and was drifting toward a cluster of guys arguing about the Titans draft class when I noticed Renata watching me from across the yard. I didn't think much of it. Then I noticed Mia running at me. And I knew before she even reached me that something was wrong. 8-year-old girls, sprinting toward their dads at a cookout, are either about to show you something thrilling or something is very wrong. Mia's face told me it wasn't thrilling. I set the plate down and caught her. Hey. What happened? She was crying, not the loud kind. The quiet kind kids do when they're genuinely hurt and trying not to make a scene. That kind is worse. It took a minute to get it out of her. Eli had said it. Standing right in front of Sophie and 2 cousins. Clear as anything, you're just a charity case. My mom says your real parents didn't even want you. You don't belong in this family. Something shifted in my chest. I want to be precise about what I felt. Because it wasn't only anger. It was colder and quieter than anger, the feeling of a man who has absorbed a decade and a half of small insults and is now watching those insults land on his 8-year-old's face. I kissed Mia's forehead, told her to find her mother, and walked over to where Eli was standing near the fence with a couple of other kids. I didn't yell. I didn't grab him. I put an arm around Mia, who'd followed me anyway, and rested a calm hand on Eli's shoulder so he'd look at me instead of his friends. Hey, look at me. He looked up. These girls carry my name. They belong here just like everybody else. Don't you ever say that again. That was it. That was all I said. I don't know exactly what Renata saw from across that yard, or what version of events assembled itself in the 3 seconds between her spotting us and reaching us. But what happened next took the whole backyard from loud to dead silent in under 2 seconds. She yanked Eli away from me hard enough that he stumbled, then turned and slapped me. Open palm. Hard enough I heard it before I felt it. Don't you dare touch my son. You pathetic loser. Her voice was shaking, not with fear. With fury. You're not even a real father anyway. You only adopted them because you couldn't give my sister a real family. I touched my cheek. Before the sting had even finished registering, Elena was moving. She didn't freeze. She cut straight into the space between us. Face pale with shock and rage. Shouldering past her own sister, Renata. What is wrong with you? Elena's voice was trembling but fierce. In front of my children, Renata didn't even look at her. Her eyes stayed locked on me. I took a slow breath, gently pulled Elena back behind my shoulder, and looked at Renata. "I'm giving you 10 seconds to get out of my sight," I said, voice flat and calm, "before I call the police and have them walk you off your mother's property in handcuffs." That's when Doug materialized with a can of beer, stepping in front of Renata like a human shield, chest puffed out. "Whoa. Whoa. Derek. Let's not do anything stupid. Man, she's just a protective mom. You put your hands on our kid first. Don't be dramatic and drag the cops into a family thing." I looked at him for a long moment. Somewhere across the yard, the speaker kept playing. A kid laughed at something. Life going on obliviously 20 feet away. I smiled. "Since you brought it up," I said quietly, "let's talk about what a real father does." I turned to my daughters. "Girls, get your things." Elena was already moving, and I want the rest of you to remember this moment. Because what happened over the next 2 weeks is when everything Renata Cross thought she knew about her life started coming apart. Some people don't realize they've been living on borrowed grace until the grace runs out. By then, the bill is already due. We pulled out of that driveway in complete silence, not the uncomfortable kind where two people are fighting and neither wants to go first, but the silence of a family that just got hit by something and needs a minute to breathe before deciding what happens next. Sophie stared out the window in the back seat. Mia leaned her head on her sister's shoulder, eyes shut. Elena sat very still in the passenger seat, hands folded in her lap, the stillness she gets when she's feeling something too large to talk about yet. I kept both hands on the wheel and drove north on I-65 back toward Brentwood. The Nashville skyline, flickering distant and indifferent against a hazy blue evening, completely unbothered by the fact that my face was still stinging. I didn't say a word about what I intended to do. Not yet. We got home. I grilled chicken and peppers. Because life continues in 11, and 8-year-olds still need dinner regardless of what their aunt did at a family cookout. We sat at the kitchen table. The 4 of us. Mia ate like nothing had happened. Because she was 8, and grilled chicken is grilled chicken. Sophie was quiet, which meant she was processing. That's what Sophie does. After the girls were down, Elena found me in the kitchen. She leaned against the counter and looked at me with the eyes that have always read me better than my own attorney. "You okay?" "I'm fine." "Derek." "I'm fine." "Elena." "I promise." She was quiet a beat. I should have said something sooner. I should have. She stopped. "You didn't do anything wrong." "I know. It's not okay." "Though." Her voice cracked slightly. "She said that in front of our daughters. She called you." She stopped herself again. I crossed the kitchen and held her for a minute. Just held her. Then I went to my home office, opened the laptop, and pulled up the banking portal. I want to be clear about something. What I did next wasn't rage. It wasn't petty. And it wasn't me throwing a tantrum because my feelings got bruised at a family cookout. It was a decision made by a man who had just watched his 8-year-old cry because of words that came directly out of his sister-in-law's mouth, words Eli didn't invent. Words he'd heard at home. I pulled up every recurring transfer connected to Renata and Doug's accounts. The monthly mortgage assistance. The tuition installments for Eli's private school over in Franklin. The occasional emergency wire that had stopped feeling like an emergency about 2 years back. I canceled every single one. All of it. Gone. I closed the laptop, went to bed, and slept better than I had in months. The first week was quiet on their end. No calls. No texts. I figured Renata was too proud to reach out and too angry to think clearly. And Doug was probably telling her it would blow over. That Derek would cool down eventually. That Elena would smooth it over the way she always did. They probably poured a couple of drinks and decided to wait it out. I went to work. I ran Mia's Saturday soccer practice at the fields over on Concord Road. I took Sophie to a used bookstore in Franklin, a different corner of Franklin than her aunt's. Thankfully, because she'd been hunting a specific paperback for 3 weeks. Sunday, I smoked a pork shoulder for 6 hours in the backyard and didn't think about Renata Cross once. Not once. It was the second week when the dominoes started falling. Elena began getting texts, then calls, and I could tell by the way her jaw tightened during them that Renata's tone was sliding from cold to something closer to frantic. I didn't ask for details. Elena would tell me when she was ready, on a Tuesday. Roughly 2 weeks after the cookout, Elena came home from meeting a friend for lunch over in the Gulch, and she had a look on her face I hadn't seen from her in a long time. Not sad, not angry. Done. Renata was there, she said, setting her keys on the counter. I looked up from my laptop. At the restaurant, didn't call ahead, just sat down across from me. Elena pulled out a bar stool and sat like she was setting something heavy on the floor. She went on for 10 minutes. About you. About how you're being childish. About how you're punishing her whole family because your pride got bruised over what she called a little family argument. A little family argument. The woman had assaulted me in front of 30 people and half a dozen children. And it was a little family argument. Their mortgage payment is late. Elena went on. The school sent a final notice on Eli's tuition. Doug apparently told her, "It's your fault that you set them up to fail." I said nothing. Elena looked at me. She asked me why I was letting my deadbeat husband ruin their lives. The kitchen went very quiet. "What did you say?" I asked. Elena was still a moment. And I watched something move across my wife's face, something I can only describe as 18 years of patience finally reaching the bottom of the well. Like a dam that had held everything it was built to hold. And then some. And was now quietly, finally letting go. I told her the truth. Elena said. I straightened slightly. All of it, all of it. Derek. Her eyes were steady. No tears. Just clarity. She needed to hear it. I'm done protecting her from it. We moved out to the back porch that evening. 2 glasses of sweet tea sitting untouched between us. I hadn't been at that lunch table in the Gulch. But as the cicadas started up, Elena walked me through every word she'd handed her sister. When Renata finished her performance, the sighing, the guilt-tripping, the dramatic pauses, the, "Don't you care about your own family?" Elena looked across the table and said, "It was never my money." Renata blinked. What? Every dollar. Every single dollar that kept your lights on and paid Eli's tuition and covered your mortgage. That was Derek's money. Not mine. His. He told me to let you think it was mine. He didn't want the drama. He was protecting me from having to manage your reaction to knowing the truth. Silence. The husband you called a loser at a backyard cookout. In front of his children, he has been quietly funding your life for years. While you look down at him. While your son repeated whatever he hears you say at home into our daughter's face. That was him paying for it. Renata apparently opened her mouth. Elena didn't let her get there. And while we're on the subject of real fathers, you want to go there, really? Elena leaned forward. We adopted because I'm the one who can't carry a pregnancy. My body. My limitation. Derek has spent 10 years letting this whole family quietly assume it was his problem. Because he knew exactly how you'd treat me if you knew the truth. He protected my dignity from people exactly like you. Renata. He never said a word. Not to you. Not to anyone. He is twice the man your husband will ever be. When Elena got to that part on our back porch, she stopped talking for a second. I didn't say anything either. I looked out at the yard, where the girls had been chasing fireflies an hour earlier, and I felt something I genuinely hadn't expected. Not satisfaction. Not vindication. Just the particular weight of being truly known by somebody, of having your wife look at the people who dismissed you and say, "You never saw him at all." Was she crying? I asked eventually. By the end, Elena took a sip of tea. I didn't wait around to watch. I nodded. We sat there a while longer. Somewhere down the street, a neighbor's dog barked at nothing. Mia had left her soccer ball in the middle of the lawn again. Ordinary life. Continuing. But here's what I knew that Elena hadn't mentioned on that porch. Because Elena didn't know it yet. The same day she had that conversation with her sister. I'd made 2 phone calls. The first was to my attorney, a sharp woman named Priya who's handled my business contracts for 9 years and has a tone that makes insurance adjusters nervous. I told her what happened at the cookout. I told her I had 3 longtime family friends who were standing right there. Stone, sober, already willing to give written statements. I asked her to move forward. She didn't hesitate. I'll reach out to the DA's office this week. The second call was to the mortgage lender. When Doug and Renata's mortgage hit a restructuring wall 2 years earlier, the lender had required a co-signer to qualify for the modified terms. Doug had come to Elena. Elena had come to me. I'd signed on. Because, say it with me, I loved my wife and wanted to keep the peace. Well, peace had been officially canceled. I called the lender holding their modification. Because Doug lost his job 4 years ago over a licensing violation. He'd concealed his true employment status from the bank during the restructuring process, using my clean credit as cover. I informed the bank's fraud and risk department that, as co-senior, I was formally reporting a material, concealed change in the primary borrower's employment status. I laid out documentation. The representative on the phone went very quiet, just facts. Process. Timeline. They would be defaulting the modification within the week. That's all it was on my end. 2. Facts. Process. Timeline. I hung up, went back to my desk, and finished a compliance audit I'd been drafting before the call. We had a client review that Thursday, and I don't let personal situations bleed into professional ones. That discipline goes back a long way. To when I was 29 and broke, and everyone was watching to see if I'd fail. I didn't fail then. I wasn't planning to start now. Here's what I want you to understand about the 2 weeks following that cookout in Franklin. Nothing I did was loud. No scenes. No midnight texts. No showing up anywhere I wasn't supposed to be. I went to work. I came home. I helped Sophie with a history project. I watched Mia's soccer game and yelled encouragement from the sideline like I always do. I cooked dinner 4 nights out of 7 because I genuinely like cooking and Elena works hard. I was just living my life. But underneath the ordinary surface of things, every decision I'd made was moving the way water moves quietly, steadily, with absolute certainty about where it's going. Renata and Doug just didn't know it yet. That changed when Doug called. It was a Thursday evening. I was in the driveway wiping down the truck when my phone buzzed with a number I recognized. I almost let it go to voicemail. Then I thought, why not? Doug. Derek. A pause, the specific pause of a man who rehearsed a call and already forgot his opening line. Hey. Look. Renata and I were thinking maybe we should all sit down. Talk it through. Clear the air. You know. Somewhere neutral. Nice place. Our treat. Our treat. I nearly laughed out loud. Standing there in my driveway on a Thursday evening in Brentwood, Tennessee. Sure. Doug. I said. Let's sit down. Another pause. Relieved this time. Which told me everything about what he thought this dinner would be. Great. Great. Man. Saturday work. There's a place out on the lake. Saturday's fine. Awesome. We'll get a reservation. Hey, and Derek, listen. We're really looking forward to clearing this up. Okay, we're family. Family. I ran the cloth across the hood one more time. See you Saturday. Doug, I said, and hung up. I stood there a moment in the warm evening. Sprinklers running somewhere down the block. Someone's wind chime going. An ordinary neighborhood doing its ordinary thing. They thought they were coming to negotiate. They had no idea they were walking into a closing statement. There's a specific kind of calm that settles over a man who has already made every decision that matters and is simply waiting for everyone else in the room to catch up. That's exactly where I was on Saturday evening. The restaurant Doug picked was a place called the Cliff House, out on Percy Priest Lake. All outdoor terrace seating with a view good enough to almost make bad company tolerable. Almost. It's the kind of spot people choose when they want the scenery to do emotional heavy lifting for them, neutral ground with a pretty backdrop. Smart choice by Doug's standards. Which told me it was actually Renata's idea. Elena and I got there first. We always do. I don't like walking into rooms where other people are already settled and comfortable. We got a table on the upper terrace. Ordered water. And watched the sun starting its slow slide over the lake. Everything turning bronze and gold. Elena was quiet on the drive over, not the broken kind of quiet. The resolved kind. She'd spent 2 weeks processing all of it, the cookout, the lunch table in the gulch, the 18 years underneath both of those. She'd come out the other side with her jaw set in a way I recognized. The jaw of a woman who has made her own decision and isn't looking for permission. I reached across the table and held her hand. She squeezed back without looking up from the menu. Good enough for me. Renata and Doug arrived 13 minutes late. Doug wore a button-down that had clearly been ironed specifically for the occasion. Which, for Doug, is the sartorial equivalent of a tuxedo. Renata had her hair done and was holding her handbag with both hands in front of her body like a shield. They'd rehearsed this. I could tell immediately the careful, slightly overcooked composure of people who practiced lines in the car on the way over. Doug went for the handshake first. Firm. 2 pumps. Direct eye contact. The whole production. Derek. Good to see you. Man. He turned. Elena. Elena nodded once. The temperature at the table dropped a good 6 degrees. Renata slid into the chair across from me with the specific smile of a person who needs something from you and hates that fact with every cell in her body. Derek. Renata. We ordered. Doug got a lager. Obviously. Renata ordered a glass of white. Elena got the trout. I ordered a ribeye, because I was genuinely hungry and saw no reason to let the occasion ruin my appetite. We made about 4 minutes of small talk about the heat and lake traffic before Doug cleared his throat and decided it was time. He squared his shoulders. Leaned in. Hands folded on the table, the picture of reasonable sincerity. Look, man, we know things got heated that Saturday. Renata shouldn't have. What happened shouldn't have happened. Okay, we apologize for that. He glanced at Renata, who nodded on cue, like they'd choreographed it. But you've got to understand. She was stressed. She saw you grab Eli's arm and she reacted. She's a mom. You know. And honestly, he paused for effect, cutting off tuition for the kid over a family argument. That's a little extreme. Don't you think? Feels like you're punishing the whole family because your pride got hurt. Another pause. And then the line I could tell he'd been saving. It almost feels like you set us up to look bad. He sat back. Renata nodded slowly along. Wine glass stem rotating between her fingers. There it was, the whole performance. Half apology. Pivot to justification. Land on the implication that I was somehow the actual problem. Classic. I let the silence sit a beat. I picked up my water glass. Took a slow sip. Set it back down precisely where it had been. Then I smiled, the same smile from the backyard in Franklin. Doug, I said, voice completely level. You didn't invite me here to apologize. He blinked. What, no? Man. We genuinely. You invited me here because your mortgage is due. I kept my eyes on him. Calm as a board meeting. You're not sorry Renata assaulted me. You're sorry I'm the one holding the checkbook. Dead silence at our table. The table beside us erupted in laughter over something, a birthday. Balloons. A completely different universe. Renata's wine glass stopped rotating. Now hang on. Doug started. I'm not finished. I said it quietly. No edge. No heat. Just a statement of fact. Doug, to his credit, or maybe just his instinct for self-preservation, stopped talking. I looked at Renata directly. For the first time in 18 years. I wasn't stepping back. I wasn't managing the room's temperature. I wasn't protecting anyone's feelings at the expense of my own. You stood in front of 30 people, including my daughters, and told me I wasn't a real father. That I gave those girls a charity home because I couldn't give your sister a real family. I paused. I want to make sure we're remembering the same moment before I go on. Renata opened her mouth. Don't, Elena said. One word. Quiet as a closed door. Renata closed her mouth. I continued. You've believed for 18 years that I was nobody, that Elena carried this family. That I was furniture that came with your sister when she walked through the door. I tilted my head slightly. I let you believe that. That's on me. I thought I was keeping the peace. What I was actually doing was financing a version of reality that was comfortable for you and invisible to me. That ends tonight. Doug shifted in his seat. The rehearsed composure was cracking at the edges. A police report has been filed, I said. Doug's beer glass paused halfway to his mouth. The district attorney's office is reviewing it. Assault charges. Doug? Not a family dispute. Not a heated moment. A crime, regardless of what Renata told herself about why she did it. I folded my hands on the table. I have 3 longtime family friends who were standing right there and have already given written statements. I also have 2 family members willing to confirm the sequence of events. What I don't have is any interest in pretending this was a misunderstanding. Renata's face had gone the color of the tablecloth. Derek. Her voice had completely lost the practiced tone from 10 minutes earlier. This was the real one, smaller. Tighter. Look. I know I went too far. I know that. But criminal charges were family. You told my 8-year-old daughter her real parents didn't want her. I said, without raising my voice, without flinching. You said that to a child, through your son. Then you walked across a yard and hit me in front of her. I let that land. So, I need you to understand something. Renata, this isn't about family politics anymore. The bronze evening light did beautiful things over the lake. A pontoon boat crawled across the water far below us. Doug set his beer down. Okay. Derek. I hear you. The charge is all right. That's serious. We get it. But let's talk about the financial stuff. The mortgage. Eli's school, those are real consequences for our kid. He didn't do anything. Eli repeated what he heard at home. I said, those are his consequences too. And yours, but the cosign is done. I reached into my jacket and slid a single folded document across the table. That's formal notification from my attorney. When you concealed your job loss from the lender during the restructuring, Doug, you committed bank fraud. I reported it to their risk department last week. My name has been formally released from the liability, and the bank has revoked the modified terms. Effective immediately. An acceleration notice follows separately. If you haven't gotten it yet, it'll be there Monday. Doug unfolded the page with hands that weren't entirely steady. He stared at it. I watched the color drain out of his face in real time. Like someone had pulled a plug somewhere. The foreclosure process starts when the bank initiates it. I said, that timeline is between you and your lender now. I'm no longer part of that conversation. You can't, Doug looked up. Call it off. You can't just, we have a kid in that house. You have a kid in that house. I said, which is exactly the kind of thing a real father thinks about before the damage is done. Not after. That one landed where it was supposed to. Renata made a sound that wasn't quite a word. Her eyes had gone glassy. She'd stopped touching her wine. The monthly transfers are canceled. The tuition assistance is canceled. I said, every financial arrangement between our households existed because I loved my wife enough to keep the peace at my own expense. That arrangement required a basic level of respect as its foundation. I looked at Renata steadily. You demolished that foundation in about 40 seconds at a backyard cookout. Derek, please. Renata's voice actually broke. The practiced composure, the performance, all of it gone. What was left underneath was a woman staring at consequences she never truly believed would arrive. Please. I'm asking you. I'll apologize formally. Publicly. However you want. I'll call the DA myself. Derek. Our house. Here's the part I want you to sit with. Because I felt something in that moment that surprised me. Not satisfaction. Exactly. Not the hot, sharp feeling of winning. Something quieter. The feeling of a door finally closing on a room you've been trapped in for a long time. And knowing you don't have to go back. I looked at my sister-in-law. Really looked at her. And I felt nothing that required me to be cruel. I'd said everything that needed saying. Clearly. Calmly. With receipts. I stood up. Buttoned my jacket. I spent 18 years protecting your feelings. I said, that's over now. From this point forward, I'm only protecting my own family, my wife. And my daughters. Who belong in every room they walk into. I picked my phone up off the table. Good luck with the bank. And good luck paying for dinner. I extended my hand to Elena. She took it without a single moment of hesitation. Picked up her purse. And rose to her full height. In that way she does when she's completely certain about something. Renata reached out and caught her sister's arm. Elena. Please. Just. Elena looked down at her sister's hand. Then up at her face. I love you. She said simply. But I'm done managing what you refuse to take responsibility for. She stepped away from the table. We walked out through the restaurant together. Past a birthday party with a cluster of silver balloons. Past a cheerful server who called out, "Y'all have a great night." And out into the warm evening. The valet brought the truck around. I tipped him. We got in. I pulled out of the Cliff House's lot and headed back down the hill toward home. Elena was quiet for about 2 minutes. Then she said, "Good luck paying for dinner," and started laughing. Not the polite kind, the real kind. The full-bodied kind I fell for 17 years ago in a coffee shop off Elliston Place. When she was 23, and I was the broke guy at the next table, asking to borrow her phone charger, I started laughing too. We laughed for most of a mile before either of us said another word. Here's what happened after the DA's office moved forward. Renata accepted a plea agreement, a formal assault charge, community service hours, and a protective order, keeping her a specified distance from me and my daughters for 16 months. She signed it. No trial. No public spectacle. Just paperwork and consequences. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings a little over 7 weeks after that Saturday dinner at the Cliff House. Doug found a smaller rental out in Smyrna, about 25 minutes southeast of where they'd been living. Eli switched from the private academy in Franklin to the local public middle school in their new district. From what Elena's heard through the rest of the family, he's doing fine. Better than fine. Actually, about 3 months after the cookout, Eli sent Sophie and Mia a handwritten note. Elena showed it to me. He apologized not the way his father apologized at that restaurant. Performing, calculating, angling for a return on the investment of his words. He apologized the way 12-year-olds apologize when someone has actually gotten through to them. Clumsy. Sincere. Real. I kept that note in my desk drawer. It reminded me the boy was never the villain. He was just a kid, handed the wrong script by the adults in his life. Maybe somebody finally handed him a better one. I want to tell you about one more evening, a few weeks after all of it settled, because it's the part that actually mattered. Mia was at the kitchen table working on a school poster board about her family tree. Glitter glue everywhere. When she looked up out of nowhere and asked, "Daddy, are we a real family?" I put down the glue stick. "Come here." She climbed into my lap. 8 years old. Still small enough to do that. "We are the realest family I know," I told her. "You understand me," she thought about it. Serious little face and all. "Yeah," she said. "Okay." Then she climbed back down and went right back to her poster board. "Yeah. Okay." I didn't gloat. Not once, not to extended family. Not on the phone. Not in a single text message to anyone who asked. That was never the point of any of it. This was never about breaking Renata. It was about stopping her. I should say something here about what I didn't feel, because I think it matters more than what I did. I didn't feel triumphant when the bank's letter went out. I didn't feel powerful sitting across from Doug, watching him realize the ground under his family had shifted. What I felt, mostly, in the weeks after, was lighter. Like I'd been carrying a duffel bag full of bricks through 18 years of holiday dinners and finally set it down at the door. There's a particular kind of tired that comes from being underestimated on purpose. Year after year. And choosing not to correct the record because correcting it would cost your wife more than it would cost you. I understand now why some men just let that tiredness calcify into resentment and carry it forever. I almost did. I think the only reason I didn't is that I never stopped believing, somewhere underneath all of it, that the day would come when the truth wouldn't need my permission to surface anymore. It just needed a slap in a backyard to speed things along. A month or so after the Cliff House dinner, my business partner, Marcus, who has known me for almost as long as Elena, has asked me over lunch why I'd let it go on so long. Why I'd let an entire branch of my in-laws think I was some kind of afterthought in my own marriage for the better part of 2 decades. I thought about it for a second before I answered. Because the alternative was making Elena choose between her sister and her husband every single Thanksgiving. I said. And I decided a long time ago that I'd rather be underestimated than make her carry that. Marcus just nodded slowly and said, "Man, I would not have lasted 18 months. Maybe not everyone could have. I'm not saying it was the right call for every situation, or even that I'd necessarily recommend it. I'm saying it was the call that fit my marriage. And it held right up until the exact moment it stopped needing to. There was a family gathering at Thanksgiving that same year, smaller. At our place instead of Renata and Doug's mother's house. Since the protective order made the usual venue complicated for everyone. Elena's mother came. A few cousins. Renata and Doug did not. Obviously. Though Elena's mother told us Renata had asked. Quietly. Whether there was any chance of being invited someday. When things settle, Elena didn't answer that one either way. She just said, "We'll see." Which from Elena means exactly what it sounds like, not a yes. Not a no. Just an honest unwillingness to promise something she doesn't feel yet. I carved the turkey. Sophie made a joke about my carving technique that got a genuine laugh out of her grandmother. Mia insisted on saying grace and thanked God specifically for soccer, tacos, and Dad not being mad anymore, which got the whole table laughing in a way that felt like something healing rather than something forced. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the girls were asleep, Elena and I sat out on the back porch again. Same 2 chairs. The same view of the yard. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You okay?" she asked, echoing the question from that first night. Except this time, there wasn't anything underneath it that needed fixing. "I'm good," I said, and for the first time in longer than I could easily measure. I actually meant it without qualification. 18 years of silence. 18 years of stepping back. Writing checks. Keeping the peace. Staying quietly in the background of a family that never bothered to look closely enough to see who was actually holding it together. And, in the end, it took one slap, one smile, and the calm, unhurried decision of a man who finally stopped protecting the wrong people to change all of it. My name is Derek Callahan. I'm 46 years old. I live in Brentwood, Tennessee. And every single person under my roof carries my name on purpose. That's what a real father does.